My name's Carolyn, and I work for ConsenSys Systems, which is a company that's building applications on the Ethereum blockchain. And I got into blockchain technology and Ethereum specifically through, I guess, like a non-traditional route. I'm not a developer, I'm not a technical person. When I learned about Ethereum through some friends of mine actually in Boston at the MIT Media Lab, some people who were doing research on it, I was introduced to it from a almost philosophical perspective. And what really appealed to me about it was the massive potential that the technology has for shifting humanity forward in a lot of different like social, economic, political realms, and really sort of being a piece of technology that will help to actualize sort of the organic movement of human systems and human relationships from kind of localized and requiring trust in institutions to global and networked with increasing complexity. My background is in the social sciences, so learning about some of the more technical aspects of Ethereum was kind of daunting, and it took me a while to kind of get into it and learn all the terminology, you know, like what's a hash and like a Merkle tree. All that stuff is really foreign, and being in this industry and not coming from a technical background, it can be kind of funny and frustrating to kind of hear all that technical terminology to describe it all the time, because really I think what the technology is in its essence can be described in ways that kind of don't go into all the cryptography and the math. And it's something that I think that you could reach a lot of people in a lot of different audiences if there were more people in this space who understood it in a more holistic and historical perspective. Ethereum is a type of a blockchain that allows you to have peer-to-peer transactions without the need for a centralized trusted third party. And what makes Ethereum special and different from a blockchain like the Bitcoin blockchain is that it has a virtual machine that runs like a Turing-complete programming language and has these pieces of code called smart contracts that can essentially allow for more complex transactions and logic. And that's a lot of fancy computer language, but essentially what Ethereum allows you to do is be able to have peer-to-peer interactions that can encode business logic into a blockchain. Another thing I like to say, a one-liner about like what blockchain is, what Ethereum is you know, the internet. Think about what the internet did for communications, for the media, for the spread of information of any type. It really like democratized it, right? What blockchains are going to be capable of doing is essentially doing that, but instead of for media and communications and information, blockchain is going to be able to democratize business logic. And this has applications for the financial world, for really any sort of industry that has requires kind of like complex interactions between parties that need to trust each other. And it's going to allow you to sort of build economies for your own lives and your own communities, and that are defined by value that as self-sovereign to the individual and to communities, and not value that is assigned and codified by institutions. Smart contract is just a piece of code that executes autonomously on a blockchain. And the reason why having a piece of code on a blockchain is special is because a blockchain is a record of all different state changes or transactions that doesn't have to be owned by a centralized institution. It's supported and verified by a community. And a smart contract is essentially, it's just kind of like a little add-on onto a blockchain that makes it have extra functionality and do more things than a normal ledger can do, where it's just enter and exit information. Usually when I, meet somebody or I talk to a relative and they ask, what do you do? And a sort of cocktail party question and jump into explaining what blockchain is. Sometimes I'll go down the Bitcoin route. I'll usually mention it because most people have heard of Bitcoin. But the example that I go to immediately is to talk about, think about peer-to-peer platforms. Now, peer-to-peer platforms are something that is actually very new. 10 years ago, people would have thought you were crazy, if you brought up the concept of Airbnb, letting strangers sleep in your home and whatever, but now it's totally commonplace. But to give the example of Ethereum is a technology that can allow you to have peer-to-peer interactions, peer-to-peer transfer of value, without a middleman, without intermediaries. So imagine a peer-to-peer platform like an Uber or an Airbnb, but without the Uber, without the Airbnb, with just code, creating that trusted connection between two peers. And that's something that people usually kind of grasp onto of okay, that makes sense as the next evolutionary piece, in peer-to-peer platforms. Another example I like to use is thinking about self-sovereignty in our digital lives, self-sovereignty in identity, and also self-sovereignty around personal data. Because that, I think, is something that a certain class of people have started to think about a lot, right? You spend so many hours of your life on Facebook and on Google and all these big corporations that are profiting off of all of the data that they're collecting from your digital lives. And so explaining that Ethereum is a technology that, when built out properly and kind of Web3, right, and Ethereum as a global computer allows for self-ownership of identity in a digital space, and kind of describing how, taking out the middlemen of these large corporations that, have all of your data on these, yes, it's in the cloud, but it's on servers in giant server farms, in deserts, and really sort of explaining to people that your data is actually there. It's not something that is owned by you, and allowing people's kind of imaginations to grasp onto that concept of oh, if I could actually own all of my digital interactions, own who I was online, be able to give permission to who I give my data to be able to yes, maybe sell data, sell your personal data to attention markets, so ads can maybe be more beneficial to you, or things like that. I find that people can kind of imagine that and understand that a little bit more readily, rather than going right into kind of ConsenSys algorithms and the virtual machine and all of that kind of stuff.